Hi, everybody, and welcome to another episode on Spirit Reflections Around the Fire. Today, we're going to talk about the Māori culture of New Zealand, the spirituality, the ancient wisdom, and how it all ties to some of the things we can acknowledge and practice and see in other cultures. And for that, I'm super happy to welcome Christine Coura, who is somehow connected to my spiritual family through Geraldo Coura, whom everyone on this channel is very familiar with. He's like my spiritual dad. So Christine, I'm going to briefly read her bio here. She's a New Zealand-born HR leader and consultant with over 17 years of global experience. She's a founder of Elephant and Eagles, where she helps organizations navigate people and workplace challenges with clarity, care, and humanity. She's based in Wellington, and she brings a grounded perspective shaped by international work and a deep respect for connection. She speaks many languages, Portuguese included, as well as American Sign Language and Te Reo Maori. I hope I pronounced that right, but she's going to correct me if I didn't. She reflects a commitment to listening across cultures and ways of being. In Maori worldview, wisdom is carried through relationship between people, ancestors, and the living land. And so this is the spirit of the connection that we're going to have around the fire here in this conversation as we learn about the beautiful wisdom of the Maori culture. But first things first, let's learn a little bit about Christine. And without further ado, Christine, welcome.
Thank you. Hello, it's good morning here. So I'm wherever you are in the world. Bon dia, boa noite, if that's where you are in terms of time. But yes, hello.
I'm so excited because this is the first time I'm having a conversation with somebody who is 14 hours in the future, and the technology is just amazing. So here we go.
And I have to tell you, it's worth looking forward to. It's a fabulous day here. So tomorrow is looking good for those of you who are still in yesterday.
I love it. I'm sure you get to say that a lot, right?
Not too often, but I really enjoy it when I can.
Awesome, Christine. So tell us a little bit about your story first, and then we'll get into the amazing Maori culture.
I will, but I do need to start, if we're going to talk about all things Māori, I do have to start following a proper tikanga or a Māori way of doing things. So I will do that. I will translate at the end, I promise.
Okay.
So, tēnā koutou kātoa, e mihi ana hau ki te mana whenua o te iwi o tēnei rōpū. Ko tautare te maunga, ko waiho te awa. No pūtararu a hau, ko pāka tōku whānau. I te taha o tōku pāpā ko Patrick, rawa ko Kathleen oku tipuna. I te taha o tōku māma ko John, rawa ko Peggy oku tipuna. Ko Dennis, rawa ko Jenny oku mātua. I whānau mai a hau ki pūtararu, ka tipu aki a hau ki te whanganui a tāra. Kei titahi bei tōku Kaihanga, ko Iaponi taku tāne. Ko Sam rawa ko Isaac aku tamariki, ko Christine Coura tōku ingoa. Nō reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou kātoa. And so a Māori way of introducing yourself, you always start by introducing yourself. So I started with giving thanks to the people who stand guard in the lands on which we're meeting today. So for you, it's in Sao Paulo, Brazil. For me, it's here in Wellington, New Zealand. And then you explain where you come from. So that's more important than who you are. So I was born in the shadow of a mountain called Totari Maunga, and it's nurtured by the Waiho River. And it's a small farming community called Pūtararu, and my family name was Pāka. And then you explain on my father's side, Patrick and Kathleen are my grandparents, and on my mother's side, John and Peggy are my grandparents. Dennis and Jenny are my parents, and although I was born in Pūtararu, I now live in Wellington, and my home is in Titahi Bay with my husband Iaponi. I have 2 children, Sam and Isaac, and my name is Christine Coura.
Wow.
So it's a really interesting way of introducing yourself. You start with the landmarks that identify you, and we would call those places your tūranga waiwai, which is the place where you stand rooted like a tree. And so for you, you mentioned at the very beginning, your hometown is Sao Paulo, Brazil. We would say that's your tūranga waiwai, that place where you stand with deep roots connected to the earth. Yeah, and so then you move through and you explain who your ancestors are, and then your parents, and then you go down into who, if you have children, who your children are, and the very last thing you mention is who you are.
That's
because
beautiful.
In the grand scheme of thing, you're the smallest cog.
It is so aligned with family constellations and systemic family work, which is something that I have a deep affinity with. And the image of family constellation work is a tree. So grounding oneself to where you come from is paramount. And then acknowledging who came before you. And you are basically, it's a continuation of that line. So then you acknowledge them first, and then acknowledge if you have successors already, like in your case with children, and and at the very last, you place yourself and introduce yourself. I love it. I'm already in love with the culture. You just got started.
And then I have to preface this by saying that I am not Māori. In New Zealand, there are two kinds of people. There are tangata whenua, which are the people of the land, our First Nations or Māori people, and then there is everyone else who is tangata te tiriti, which is the people of the treaty. So there is a treaty of Waitangi, which is one of our founding documents, which is where Māori agreed to allow others to come and live here, and we would live in harmony together and recognise their guardianship and care of the land. And so we're the people of the treaty, the ones who were invited to come and live here. And so even though it's my home, I have that respect for those who are the people of the land. Yeah.
It's terrific. And this treaty, how long does it date back to?
The treaty was signed in 1840. There was a document 5 years prior, a Declaration of Independence, where Māori did not cede sovereignty over the land. So obviously New Zealand is a colonised country. But for those of you who are joining me from yesterday, February the 6th, that is actually Waitangi Day, which is the celebration of the signing of the Treaty of Waitangi.
Really? Oh my God.
Yeah, so perfect timing.
For this.
I know, right?
The synchronicities. And so the history, Christine, is it one of relative peace, it sounds, between...
It sounds wonderful in theory. It sounds like a wonderful, harmonious relationship where there's no racism and everybody lives wonderfully and happily together. And I wish that was the case, but we're humans, right? And so, unfortunately, the Crown didn't uphold its side of the treaty. And so for many years, there were land wars, land confiscation. But one of the things that we are trying to get right is things called treaty settlements, where the Crown is actually acknowledging we did the wrong thing. We need to compensate people for having done the wrong thing. And in some cases, land has been returned to the iwi or the tribe from which it was taken. And so now Māori industry in New Zealand is a multi-billion-dollar business. And it's incredible. They provide so incredibly well. Yeah.
Beautiful. So it's kind of like a reparations movement.
Very much so. Yeah.
Acknowledge that they are the original land owners, and okay, that's beautiful.
Not quite the original land guardians, but not the owners. So it's that concept of the land does not belong to us; we belong to the land.
Right. I stand corrected. The land.
It's a small difference, but it's a really important one.
Yeah. It's huge. You care for the land. You're a faithful steward of it, but it doesn't belong to you.
And you are a guardian of it for the generations to come.
Wow, love it, love it. And so, from your upbringing in your childhood, did you have this very close connection with the Maori, or how much of that happens in New Zealand and also in your upbringing?
So in my upbringing was a little unusual. My father was a fire officer. Well, I was raised in a farming community, and then when we moved into the city, my father became a fire officer, and so we actually lived on the fire station, which was a kind of a cool upbringing, but very different. There was no racial segregation. So Māori and Pākehā or European are very integrated. I grew up in school learning Māori action songs and stick games, but it wasn't until I guess it was in my late teens and early 20s that it became more acceptable to use Māori in public. Māori only became an official language of New Zealand in the late 1980s, I think. And so New Zealand has 3 official languages: English, Te Reo Māori, and New Zealand Sign Language. They're our 3 official languages. And so now, I love that just down the road from us, there's an area where you go through and there are signs in English and Māori. I love that. I love that people are very comfortable. Instead of saying I'm from Wellington, New Zealand, I can say I'm from Te Whanganui-a-Tara in Aotearoa. Many people will talk about Aotearoa, New Zealand, instead of just New Zealand.
So they're the equivalent names in Māori language of what New Zealand is called.
In some cases, it's an equivalent. In others, it's a reference that existed. So it's not a translation necessarily, but it's a name it was known by before. So Te Whanganui-a-Tara, that's the original name of Wellington before the settlers came and changed its name to honor the Duke of Wellington.
Understood. So as you became a young adult, you were fully immersed in a way to the Maori tradition, since it sounds like it was pretty much a part of the upbringing, right?
Yeah. So one of my really close friends, she had a real affinity for all things Māori, and she asked her parents to send her to a Māori boarding school where she became fluent in Te Reo Māori, and she's now a teacher. She teaches in what we call immersion schools, which is completely teaching in Māori language. So all your subjects are taught in Māori, which is a wonderful thing. And I'm blessed right now to also work for the Ministry of Education here in New Zealand. And it's really exciting for me to see the way they are incorporating not just Māori into, not just classes in Māori culture and Māori language, but also what are ways of learning that resonate better with Māori and connect them to their upbringing. So they're looking at how do we teach Māori differently so that we have equitable outcomes for both Māori and Pākehā based on what are their cultural importance, things that are of cultural importance. Yeah, it's really incredible to see.
Perfect. And so tell me a little bit about this symbol here that our friend Geraldo shared. And we're looking at something in the screen for those that are only listening and not watching. Could you describe, Christine, what it looks like?
I will try very much to describe it. So it is a wood carving with pawa shell inlay. And I'm just trying to think of what the word is for pawa. Is it abalone? So this is a seafood shell, and this is the inside of the shell. The outside is crusty and grey and ugly, but the inside are these beautiful, rich colours. And we call that pawa. Anyway, that's what it is. So this is a manaia, and a manaia is this is a traditional Māori art piece that has been carved, and a manaia effectively is a guardian and a protector. So it's something that you will give to someone, it's for a protection for Geraldo and Ibis in their home. But it's also recognition of his place as the head of his family, and that spiritual guide and protector as well that you mentioned earlier.
Yeah, he's really fond of it, and he described with such enthusiasm over the phone. We were FaceTiming, so I could see, and his eyes were lighting up with joy, and he's just so proud of you and your family history. And he told me a little bit about how you first met when you and Yaponi went to Florida to meet them.
Yeah. So we've tried to go every year since we met. Unfortunately, this past Christmas is the first one we've missed. But the first time we went over, meeting your in-laws for the first time can be a little bit daunting. We'd FaceTimed and everything, but it was a little bit daunting. But when we were planning to go, my mum had been a little unwell. And she grabbed Iapuni's hand one day and she said to him, no matter what happens, I don't want you to cancel your trip at the end of the year. Promise me now, swear that you will not cancel this trip for anything. And she got quite worked up about it. And he was like, it's okay, Ma, I promise we will go. And I promise I will take her to see my parents. And while we were in Florida, my mother passed away. And we knew that it was coming. We knew that the time was close. I'd been talking with her cousin, and and I knew that it was close, and it was weighing really heavily on me one day. And I just said, look, I need to go lie down. And I did. I went and lay down and had a sleep. And it was, it was middle of the afternoon, and had this really weird dream where my father came to me with my brother. My brother stood behind him. My brother never spoke, but my father did. He said, sweetheart, I've come to get your mum. And I was really angry with him. And I was like, no, you're not taking her. Get out of here. You get out now, or I am calling the police. And in a gesture that is very much my father, he opened his hands out to me and he said, oh, sweetheart, you know you're not going to do that. And then I was woken by the phone ringing, and it was Mum's cousin to say she's just gone.
Wow. Yeah.
And so then I called my sister, and I said, and my sister was living in Boston at the time, and I said to her, she's gone, and she said, yeah, I know. And I said, oh, Kevin already called you? And she said, no. She said, I was sitting at the traffic lights waiting for the light to turn green, and she walked across the street in front of me, and she stopped and she smiled at me, and then she went.
Wow. I have a very fond image of your mother through Geraldo's telling of how Yaponi became very close to her.
He did.
And eventually met you, and here we are.
Yeah. My mother adored him. She absolutely adored him. So Yaponi is a nurse, and my mother was in residential care already. She was in care. She had a lot of medical issues, but we would take her out every Saturday. And Yaponi was always the one that kept an eye on her, that was very discreet if she needed something taken care of, and just so gentle with her. And yeah, what's not to adore about that, right?
Yeah.
She told me she told me if she was 20 years younger, she'd have given me a run for my money. But, here we are.
I love it. Love it. So in honor to Mom here, she's definitely with us in spirit, in good Māori spirit also.
Absolutely.
So tell me a little more as we go into the Māori culture per se, Christine, some of the beliefs that they have. We definitely saw already the ancestral importance of family and the inherited patterns to honor those and nature. What are some other elements that perhaps resonate with things like that you found in Spiritism, for example?
So I guess one of the things I love, and I think you mentioned it a little bit earlier, is the way they walk between past, present, and future so easily, and that's something that's ingrained in their culture. So often, well, always, when Māori are speaking, they will often say things 3 times. So at the end of my introduction of myself, I said, Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou kātoa, which is, greetings to everybody. But you say it 3 times, once for those who have left, once for those who are here, and once for those who are still to come.
Wow.
And so just some of those simple things where you acknowledge everybody in the room, whether you can see them or not.
Across time and across realms, I guess.
Yeah, so I guess for Māori, a Te Ao Māori worldview is a people worldview. And it says that we are all connected. And so with that connection, we have a care and a duty to each other, whether we've met before or not, because somehow or other we probably have.
Yeah, exactly. We're all connected somehow. And I think for most people, the association with Māori culture is most pronounced when that video went viral in 2025 or 24, I believe, in the New Zealand Parliament, where you did a haka. Is that right?
Absolutely, it's right. So if you want to stir me up and get me really annoyed, call the haka a dance, and that'll do it.
There we go. So it's not it.
It's absolutely not a dance. So haka is it's an expression. It's a very powerful expression. So haka, I don't know if you're a rugby fan or not, but anyone who has ever watched New Zealand play rugby know that our national team, the All Blacks, perform a haka at the beginning of every international match. And in that case, it's not just it was traditionally done in times of war, but it's also used for other things. So at the beginning of an international sporting match, it's respect for one's opponents. It's not just, it's a challenge. It's most certainly a challenge, but it's also, you are a worthy opponent, and I acknowledge that. It's also used in weddings. It's a way of greeting. If you're from the bride's side, it's a way of greeting the groom's side. Often a bride's brothers will perform haka to remind the groom that if he doesn't look after their sister, he's got them to answer to. And not just the brothers, but the cousins and the second cousins and the uncles and the fathers. So everybody gets involved in that. So it's a very powerful thing. It can be a challenge. It can be a celebration. It's also often done in funerals. At funerals, it's a way, particularly for men who perhaps are not used to expressing grief or being allowed to express grief. It's a wonderful way for them to really get that emotion in and share their grief in a way that's very powerful. And yeah, it's just an incredible thing to see. So the one that you saw in Parliament, it was a challenge. It was we will be heard, we will not be silenced, and the people who took part in that haka were actually suspended from Parliament for a week.
I saw that. Yeah, that was a consequence.
Yes, it was. Which I don't personally agree with, but those were the rules that were applied. Yeah.
Well, it definitely put their culture and tradition on the map in such a powerful way, because it is an extremely intense way of, I want to say, chanting, but in a way that it sounds confrontational, but it's also celebratory in a way, I guess.
It very much depends on the context, but yes, you're right. It can be confrontational. It can be a challenge. It can be celebrational. It can be an expression of grief. It can be an expression of respect. It can be so many things. It very much depends on the context in which it's performed.
And Christina, how is their view on reincarnation?
So I'm not so sure that there is a view on reincarnation, but certainly a view that spirits walk among us, that they walk with us. So for example, when a person dies, at the time of death, Māori will open a window to allow the spirit to go free. But they also believe that the spirit remains with us until those final funeral rites are completed, and then it begins its journey. But always coming back to be with people. So yeah, there is certainly that. I'm not sure that there is a particular view on reincarnation as part of Māori culture or Māori worldview, but certainly that connection to the spirit is.
Nice. Yeah, I guess it makes sense that you stay here on Earth and you have the company of your ancestors to guide you and assist you. And so while they're there and you're here, you're sort of helping each other in both directions. I can sense, right?
Yeah.
There's something here that I wanted to ask you regarding the genealogy and how the genealogy of a person shapes their identity and responsibility. How does that genealogy, like who my ancestors are, shape the identity of the person in Māori's perspective?
So it very much does. So for the most part, it's roughly believed that the majority of Māori arrived in New Zealand by around 1300 AD, and they came by waka or by canoe. And there are 7 major canoes that are acknowledged, and many of the tribes or the iwi that are here are named after those canoe. So that's how they identify, is through the canoe that they came in on. But then there is also a group of people known as tuhoi, and tuhoi means effectively children of the mist, and they don't know how they arrived in New Zealand. They believe that they came down from the mists of the Tuhoi Ranges and have always been here as guardians of the land in that particular area. So even within Māori, there are very differing views depending on which canoe they came in on, or whether they were here already. There's lots of different views on that. But however that is, your identity comes from your genealogy. Your whakapapa is the word that they use, and that is, who do I connect back to? That connects back to my source of water, whether that's a river or an ocean, and my mountain. So Māori always identify themselves, if you go backwards from themselves, back through their ancestors, to the place where they were born, to the river that nurtures that area, and first of all, the mountain that it comes from. And there are mountains, they believe that the mountain is a type of ancestor. And so they connect very strongly with the land and with their genealogy back through that. And so then if you were to say to me that, if I had said that Totari Maunga is the hill I identify with, I was born in the shadow of that mountain, you might say, oh, so was I. I say, oh, well, Waiho is my river. And they might say, oh, Waikato is my river. So they're from the other side of the mountain immediately. You know immediately where they're from, whether they're friend or foe. And so you have that positioning, that starts to tell you a little bit about a person. I have introduced myself the way I did today, and I have had people come up to me afterwards and say, oh, my family are from Tokoroa, which is next door to the small farming community I grew up in. And so there was that connection. And then suddenly they will say, do you know Eddie White that used to live on the corner of White's Road and State Highway 1? I'll say, yes, my grandparents had the farm on the opposite side of the road. And so suddenly it's a way of building connections with one another and working out your identity. And that's a really important part of Māori culture, Māoritanga.
Honoring their roots. And so, Christine, would you say that in the 1300s, those 7 canoes that are acknowledged to have arrived in New Zealand are in a way similar to, say, the 12 tribes of Israel, for example?
Potentially. So it's really hard to tell because, their route was very intentional. They were guided by stars. They came intentionally and found Aotearoa, and Aotearoa means the land of the long white cloud, because that's what it looks like from a distance. The way the two main islands are set out, right. It looked like a long white cloud. So that's where its name originally came from.
So where were they coming from? You said they were intentionally coming here. What was the backstory behind that?
So again, it's been handed down through oral legend. So they're not entirely sure, but they certainly came through Polynesia and potentially parts of Hawaii. Beyond that, there's an incredible guy called Scotty Morrison who does a lot of delving into where did Māori come from, and there are some very strong connections with Māori culture and cultures of South America. Yeah, and that's a fascinating thing to explore. So where they came from originally is not entirely known, but certainly they travelled through Polynesia in their waka and arrived eventually in New Zealand.
Gotcha. And so when you say they were intentionally heading to New Zealand, was it because of some kind of a persecution or for some event?
No. So, well, there was, a lot of times in Polynesia, there are stories of there being a loss of food. The people grow, the food isn't enough to nurture them. They start exploring, looking for other lands. They were most certainly guided by the stars, but I don't know that they originally knew New Zealand existed. Mm-hmm. And to the best of my knowledge, a famous chief named Kupe arrived here in New Zealand, recognized it as a good place, and he went back to get more of his people.
Ah, okay.
So then it became intentional from there. But before that, they were intentionally guided by the stars, and they found New Zealand as a result of that.
Very nice. And this is 1300. So
roughly, they think that migration happened between 1100 and 1300 AD. Yeah.
Okay. Gotcha. So the healing that happens across generations, for example, in family constellation work, if you have an entanglement or an identification that's toxic with an ancestor, and out of blind love and loyalty, unconscious loyalty, you're replicating those toxic patterns because you want to belong, but you are entangled. And then constellation work does some movements and some healing sentences that allow you to acknowledge and distinguish yourself from that ancestor so that you can continue your own destiny while honoring those that came before you, but not being entangled, not basically replicating the inherited patterns that are not the healthiest. Is there this kind of a distinction that happens in Maori culture?
There is certainly some incredible work, rongo mai, done in healing. So there are certainly different ways of doing it. There's a couple of incredible psychologists doing some work. Diana and Mark Kopua do some work around the Māori worldview in particular, and Hinamua Elder. They work with Hinamua elder in particular, she works with troubled youth. And often in their work with troubled youth from a mental health perspective, they will talk about Māori deities. So there's a number of different, there is Tangaroa, the god of the sea, there is Tāne, the god of the forest. So there's a number of different gods, and they will often talk through those mythological stories with teenagers or youth who are struggling particularly with mental health or with coming from troubled backgrounds, and we'll get them to identify with one or the other. You know, who do you identify with in particular? You identify with Tangaroa, the god of the sea. Yes, because your anger, it overflows the way a tidal wave might, and talking to them about how do we do that so that you become the waves that nurture and grow and help people instead. And it's so using those things that they identify with to help work through sometimes what are complex mental health or family issues. So not so much in a similar way as constellation, but certainly using the beliefs and the mythologies that they have around them to do good with it.
Beautiful. Yeah, because we've seen, for example, in North America, the Native Americans there suffered a lot of land grab and persecution and all kinds of traumatic experiences. And we see that being passed down generation to generation, where levels of alcoholism, levels of depression, and are much higher in those populations. And There's a lot of work being done to help to heal those traumas that come from the ancestors, you know.
And we see that here in New Zealand too. We, Māori are overrepresented in our prison populations, in our mental health populations. So we see that here too, and a lot of that comes from colonization and inequity. And it's how do we work together? You know, we'll sit there and go, well, you know, we've got some mental health experts and we've got some people here who can help, but it's helping our way is not necessarily helping in a te ao Māori way. And so it's actually as a European person learning to listen and learning to step back and understand that what I think might work for me is not what will work for Māori rangatahi or youth and what they need to be able to heal. And it's quite incredible to see that at work. Māori will, they will build education centres, they will build health centres. Mirimiri is a form of Māori massage that can help with mental issues, physical issues, emotional issues. And having benefited from a few mirimiri sessions myself, they are incredible. The best sleep of my life after I had one of those.
There are massages?
Yeah. Yep. And so what they will do is they will say, what's bothering you? And you can say, well, I've just had a relationship end that I didn't expect. I didn't see it coming. I can't sleep. I can't eat. And they will work on looking for so perhaps similar in some ways to Reiki in terms of using that energy to look for the points where they can help to ease whatever is troubling you. But it's a massage, and it's incredibly respectfully done. It starts with a karakia. It ends with karakia. It's incredible.
Yeah, because our bodies store emotions,
absolutely,
memories of events, and so finding a way to unclog those knots can be super healing. That's for sure. Yeah. There's something here that is called mana and tapu, and how the concept guide respect, boundaries, and dignities. Can you speak a little bit about that?
Absolutely. So mana, oh gosh, I'm trying to think of an English way to describe it. So mana is your dignity, your respect. It encompasses very much who you are and how you carry yourself and how people treat you. So even at work, we use the terms, is this, when we're going to talk to someone, is the way we are going to talk to them, is it mana enhancing or is it mana diminishing? And you always want to be mana enhancing when you're talking with people. So that's around how you treat others and how you show respect for others, and that's probably the best way to describe it. Tapu is an interesting word. So tapu, loosely translated, means sacred. But it's not sacred. But it's not just talking. It can be things that are. So, for example, if someone has died in your home, a rahui might be placed on it, or it becomes a tapu place for a while. It is sacred. There, you wouldn't hold a party for a certain length of time. You wouldn't. It's about respecting things that are outside of physicality. That's what tapu is. And so when you started at the beginning with a prayer, you invited tapu, you invited sacredness, you invited us to focus on this session and what we're creating here together. At the end of it, we should finish again with a prayer or karakia to return to noa, which is our everyday things that we do, everyday living. So it's a way of, so tapu is a space you can create as well. And by offering a prayer at the beginning, you created that space, but then at the end, it's important to release that space as well.
I love that. So tapu is basically not surrendering, but opening up to the invisible, if you will.
That's one way of looking at it, yeah.
And then when you're done with that activity, you evoke it again so you can return to, what's it called? The
noa, N-O-A, noa.
Noa.
Yeah. So it's between tapu and noa. Noa is just going about your everyday stuff. So in a tapu state, you wouldn't have food handy. You wouldn't eat during that space, not because it's terrible to eat, but just because your focus is on whatever you have closed. We actually use it in a workspace. We will start and end meetings with a karakia as a way to say we are together in this space. We are focused on a specific thing. Whatever that thing may be, we put aside all other distractions, including our phones and our laptops. We discuss the thing that we have come here to discuss, and then at the end, we release that and go back to noa.
I love that because you truly seem to honor and adopt these traditions in your everyday life, because you just described the professional setting.
Yeah.
That's
something, look, that's really important to me. I'm aware that I am tangata tiriti, which is a person of the treaty, and that my ancestors were in part responsible for the ill effects of colonization. I know there were some great effects, but they're also responsible for the ill effects. Right. And so giving effect to my obligations under the Treaty of Waitangi is really important to me. And that's just one way I can honor that.
I love it. I love it because whenever we gather to eat, for example, the idea of slowing things down for a second and doing a moment of prayer, of acknowledging the food, of gratitude, celebrating it, has already been shown to help with digestion, to reduce heartburn, to improve the way your bowel movement is, because you truly bring your attention to that present moment. And in work meetings, especially those that may be a little more complicated, if only people were to start with a moment of like a prayer, so that everyone could center and ground and be around the same frequencies, would facilitate things and dialogue so much more. So I love that.
And it really does. Yeah.
It's a whole world of difference. So we were talking about in moments of tapu, there's no food, for example. Is there a culture of fasting when it comes to religious observance, or like when somebody dies in the period of grief, there are certain restrictions so that you could observe the grief properly?
Not so much restrictions, and then they might tend, because you have culture on one hand and you have religion on the other, and sometimes religion has a culture to it. So for example, you have a Jewish religion, which is very much a religion, but you also have a culture that goes with that, that's ingrained in it. So sometimes you'll get that with traditional Māori, when a person dies, you other than traveling, if you need to travel to be at the funeral or to be with the family, you would do that. But otherwise, you might restrict your travel for a while. For a few days, just to be conscious of, and that can actually be a really smart thing, because if you think about it, if someone close to you has passed away and you're incredibly emotional about it, you might be distracted a little bit, and that makes you more prone to car accidents. So by restricting your travel a little bit there, you're saying, I want to give space to the grief that I have. So it's not really a list of do's and don'ts. It's really about whatever it takes for you to be able to hold space for that grief and the expression of that grief. So that becomes important. Gathering together with the family. So often when a Māori person has passed away, they will bring the body home, and people will come and visit for a few nights. They will come and visit between a certain time. They will speak about what they knew about the person. They will tell stories. They will laugh together. They always sing. So when someone stands up and shares about someone who's passed away, their family will then join them afterwards, and a song will be done. There's always, so someone talks and then they sing. Someone talks and then they sing. That's an important part, and that's just bringing community together and allowing emotion and holding space for that grief. And then that space is closed, and everyone eats together afterwards. And they'll do that until the funeral and then the burial. So there might be a few nights of that. You'd go there in the evening, you sit with the family, often there's an open casket if that's possible, and people, so their way of expressing grief. The first time I experienced Māori death, it was just a huge eye-opener for me, and I realized how well Māori are able to express and deal with grief compared to my European restricted Christian upbringing,
right,
which was very, very different in that respect.
Tell us a little bit about that experience. Take us back to that place.
Yeah. So, I had I'd lost a friend through suicide, and the body was taken home, and they were able to have the casket open, which was wonderful. To see people happy to go up and kiss the body, and to know the spirit is not here. This is just an envelope, as we would say, but the spirit is nearby, and they truly believed he was nearby. He hadn't gone very far, and people there, they would talk. They would share their anger at him not reaching out and not asking for help. They would share their insecurities about, was I not a good friend? Was I not there for him? Was I not a good cousin? Why didn't I see these signs that my brother was struggling? There was all of that. There was an opportunity for it to be expressed, and then for everyone to, not just the family to sing together at the end of each talk, but for everyone to join in if they knew the song. And sometimes they were in English, sometimes they were in Māori, but all of that. And then you would have a funeral. And then the burial afterwards, all of the men in the family grabbed a spade and helped with the actual burial afterwards, burying the casket. And again, that's a physical way of them expressing their grief as well as their respect for the person that has passed away. By that physical action was really important for them.
It sounds like it's a tremendously emotionally intelligent culture.
Yes, very, very much so. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, because if you were to take a step back for a second and have the equivalent of a funeral in the Western world in many more dogmatic Christian traditions, some of them won't even acknowledge a person's death by suicide as something to be ashamed of, or not even bury them in sacred grounds in the Catholic Church, for example. Yeah. It's just a whole different perspective.
Oh yeah. As someone, my brother took his own life, and I went through that. We were allowed to have a service in a Catholic church, but he was not allowed a requiem mass, which upset my parents very much. Wow. But again, that was because he had taken his own life. That was denied. It was denied my parents more than anything, and that was a source of hurt for my dad for a very long time. Yeah.
And how do your parents? How did they come across their own spiritual beliefs and the Maori culture in their own experiences?
So they had less experience with it growing up. They grew up in a time where Māori were seen and not heard, more than anything. But they were both very spiritual in their own way. My grandfather died when I was 6, and I would often sense him around. I never saw him, but I would often sense him. My dad told me openly that he would see his father.
Okay.
And then, there was a time when my mother was involved in a car accident, and, she'd been in ICU. We didn't know if she was going to make it. And my sister and I had both flown over from the US to be with her, and we were there when they brought her out of a coma. And the very first thing she said to us was, "Your brother sent me back."
Your brother sent me back.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And we're like, there he goes, skiving out of his duties again. Thanks, Patrick.
Beautiful, beautiful.
Yeah.
So, there's something. There's a term in Portuguese called sincretismo. I think in English it's syncretism. I may be wrong, but it's basically when many religions sort of merge together, and there is an exchange of religious traditions. Like one religion will adopt certain rituals and traditions from that religion into their own and adapt and create something new. Does that happen with the Maori culture there, coming across the contact with Christians, for example, coming from Europe?
Look, you do see some synchronicity between them. You do see that. So, for example, in Māori mythology, there is the story of creation. For example, it's very beautiful. It talks about, so just roughly in English, it talks about Sky Father and Earth Mother coming together to create their children, who are the god of the sea, the god of the forests, the god of the birds, and so forth. But that one of their children was very jealous, and because of their love for each other was so strong, and split them apart. And that's how you have Sky Father and Earth Mother. Earth Mother is Papatua Nuku, and Rangi is Sky Father. And so you have this beautiful story of creation that it doesn't mirror the traditional Old Testament version, but there's things that are aligned to it.
Definitely
You get things like that. So you do see things that are very similar. I spent some time living in India, and I talking to my friends who are from the Hindu faith, and understanding there are a lot of things in Hinduism that are quite similar to Māori mythology and Te Ao Māori. So you see things, and you can find commonalities if that's what you want to look for. It's the same with differences. If you want to see, well, we're very different because you're Brazilian and I'm New Zealand,
right.
But you can sit there and find commonalities if that's what you want. And that's very much the Māori way, is look for common, even from the way you introduce yourself, look for commonalities first.
Beautiful, of course.
Yeah.
I love it. Show us your tattoos, Christine. Tell us about the backstory of that. I really love that.
Well, I will hope. Oh, I've got to hold on. Just try and get this to a point where you might be able to. I don't know how well you can see that.
We can see it. Let me put it on the larger screen here. This one. Here we go.
There you go. Can you see that okay?
Yep.
All right. So I'll just talk about that one in particular. That is, that's my wedding ring. So I had that done in September last year. We'd been married for a little while, but I wanted to get that done. And that's also a manaya, very similar to the one that Geraldo has on his wall. This is just a different form of it. And it represents, it curves down to my ring finger, where you would normally wear a wedding ring. And the one thing I love about it is I never get to take my wedding ring off. It's there. It's a permanent fixture, a permanent reminder that I actively chose Iapuni as my husband. But not only that, it's also it curves around, and it doesn't touch this other tattoo I have here on my arm, which is that's a slightly different one. It doesn't touch it, but it curls around to it, which recognizes that they have a relationship to each other. And it's a manaya, which is a protector or a guardian. And that came about after I told the artist who did this for me, I told him the story of what had happened. I went in April last year to get my flu vaccination. And at the same time I was getting that, the lady looked at my records and said, "Oh, you haven't had a COVID vaccine for a while." And I've always been very conscious of getting COVID vaccinations because obviously with traveling to see Iapuni's parents, I never want to take anything with them that could potentially put their health at risk. And so I said, "Oh yeah, well, we might as well do that too." So I ended up having 2 vaccinations, and I had a reaction to one, the other, or both. I'm not entirely sure. And ended up in the emergency room, and Iapuni had been called and he met me there. He's a nurse. And so, of course, he was sitting there watching my vitals. I was struggling to breathe, and it was him that noticed I had stopped breathing and hit the emergency button.
Oh, my God.
And called in the crash team that effectively saved my life. So my husband quite literally saved my life. Yeah. And so he is my protector. And you know what? This is the man who slept on the hospital floor and refused to leave my side. And I've never had anybody do that for me before, you know? So is he my protector and my guardian? Absolutely, yes, he is. And I look at that every day and I'm reminded of how blessed I am.
Beautiful. I love it. Christine, tell us a little bit about some of the insights and the wisdom you gained from Maori culture that are like desperately needed in 2026 as we record this, especially for the younger generation with the technology. What are some of those insights you could bring?
So I would say pono, kaitiaki, and whanaungatanga. So pono is a word that means trust, loyalty, and I think those are things that, particularly for our young people, you know, we need to learn to rely on each other and to trust each other, and in return be a trustworthy and loyal person. So it's a give to get and get to give. You know, it's a two-way thing. And I think that's what I take from Te Ao Māori the most, is that everything is two-way. Everything is two-way. So manaakitanga is the act of being a good guardian, but also being a good host. So welcoming people into your home, being made to feel welcome in someone's home, being worthy of being welcomed into someone's home. So, you know, it works both ways. It's not just saying welcome to my home. It's being a good guest as well as being a good host. In the workplace, someone new starts, welcome them, get to know them a little bit. You know, if there's an argument at work, you know, there's two teams that don't get on, they refuse to work well together, take them to get to know each other. And once you know someone, you know, you are less suspicious of them. That's all part of Te Ao Māori and a Māori way of being. And then whanaungatanga is about relationship building. And it's about wherever you go, build a relationship. You know, right? It might be the person that welcome, you know, when you jump on a flight, you have someone that's standing at the door that checks your seat number and says welcome. You know, take that as a genuine welcome and give one back. Thank you. It's good to be here. Quite often when you do that, people they're quite taken aback. They weren't expecting it. They've become so automatically, they're so accustomed to simply saying welcome, they don't expect to have that acknowledged and given back to them. So it's that two-way thing, that relationship building, and it's called whanaungatanga, and it's really important.
In a way, it's almost like seeing. I truly see you. I truly acknowledge you.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's that listening to people too. Often when we are talking with someone, we're preparing the next thing. While they're talking, we're preparing the next thing in our head. And so we're not actually listening.
Right.
And so it's okay to actually stop and listen, and then let there be a pause while you do that formulation of what you want to say next, after you finish listening.
We are so afraid of silences.
And yet that's where the greatest things can be heard.
Indeed. Wow. Powerful. What are some of the things we could sort of end our conversation on Māori culture now? Sort of you did a beautiful prayer before we started recording, and you translated it for us, and I thought it was so moving. I was wondering if maybe you could bring that up for us. I
would be glad to bring that up for you. So it starts off, tēnei tātou katoa te whakamanaiatanga i ngā wai-a-tai i korowaihia o Aotearoa. And that's greetings to all of those who stand guard and provide protection to the oceans that abound our country. Hold fast to the sanctity of that and preserve it. And then it's Pūpuritia kia tika kia mau, hio ano te mihi atu te Kaihanga o Ngā Mea Katoa. Acknowledging the great creator of all things, the beginning and the end. Te timatanga me te mutunga, we farewell those who have passed on to the spirit world. Rato kia rato, tātou kia tātou. To those who remain, we rejoice in the breath of life. And I think that's my favorite piece, is that rejoicing in the breath of life. It's, can you imagine that? Rejoicing in the breath of life. And as someone who stopped breathing last year, I can tell you how incredible it is to be breathing.
Wow.
it's an incredible thing. And I think that's what I love that the most. And it's a reminder that every second we have here is precious. Make the most of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm recently started a philosophy course in a place called School of Practical Philosophy and Meditation. And one of the things that they're teaching, which sounds simple, but they say our brains are not meant for constant activity nonstop. So they say between the end of one activity and the start of the next one, take a pause and just breathe. Breathe a couple of times. And as you're doing that, truly ground yourself into your five senses as you're doing that breathing. Like, what am I feeling in my hands? Where's my body touching up against? How are my feet touching the ground? What am I smelling? What am I tasting? What am I hearing? Just for 30 seconds, and then go on to your next task. We multitask so much, and there's that myth that we're great multitaskers. That's nonsense. Nobody's a good multitasker. It's impossible for us to do that well, right? So I think that it has been helping me recently bring better quality of attention to the present moment and be more appreciative of the situations rather than being inside my head, as you described, preparing the response as the person is talking and therefore not listening to them. Truly.
Absolutely.
So it's been good. Tell me how you bring, because you travel the world as a consultant, how have you been bringing some of this Maori wisdom, and how has it been received in your work experiences? Like, if there's a story that comes up that you remember now, that it'd be great to illustrate that cultural bridge.
Yeah, one of my favorite ones. I had this tattoo on my arm. I got that while I was living in Chicago. A guy from New Zealand came over and did that for me. He didn't come over for me, especially, he was traveling anyway, but I took advantage of that situation, and that's become a really good talking point for me from people. What does it signify? What does that mean to you? And so there have been times where I've stopped and explained it to people, and it builds that bridge. It helps them to understand a little bit more about who I am and what I stand for. When I was living in the US, I would always use Māori greetings and endings on my emails. And there was, I guess, my favorite one is one of my colleagues in India that I used to correspond with a lot. He started using them to reply to me, and that was a really cool moment for me, was to see him take my Māori greetings and turn them back on me, and it was just such a buzz.
Beautiful.
Yeah,
beautiful. Cool. I wonder if there's anything that we haven't covered that you'd like to bring here as part of their gems, wisdom, any sort of final thoughts?
Yeah, I would. Thank you. I guess this has just been a small snippet. Māori culture is so full of richness and variety. It's not a one small packet that you can easily unpack. It's different depending on where you go in the country, where people, which waka they came in on. But one of my favorite Māori proverbs or whakatokis is he waka e ki noa, which means effectively we're all in the waka together. And if you think about that in terms of a canoe, if you've only got one person doing the rowing, you're not going to get anywhere. If you've got everybody on this side going, you're just going to go around in circles. So you've all got to move together. You've got to have somebody that can lead it, but then you've got to have a lot of people that are going to listen and synchronize together. And that's effectively what living in this world's about, right? It's about recognizing that we're all on the same kind of journey, regardless of what brand of waka we're in. We're all on a same journey, and we can't get there by ourselves. So yeah, he waka e ki noa. We're all in this together.
Beautiful. As part of our very first conversation around the fire in the year 2026, I do hope this level of solidarity and emotional intelligence that I was able to feel a little bit over the last hour talking to you, Christine, about the Māori tradition can truly resonate in people's hearts and souls and broaden our understanding of these original peoples who bring such a deep connection to nature and to the ancestors. I think one of the reasons that people suffer the most in the Western world is because of the excessive individualism and the lack of connection with their family of origin. Especially in the United States, there is this thing about the culture to dismiss my parents or blame all my problems on my parents because they screwed me up. They were bad, and so they screwed me up, and so I don't really carry them in my heart per se, and I only meet them for Thanksgiving once a year. And on Thanksgiving, we'll break bread, we'll talk, but there's a little bit of a cynicism in the air, even with such a beautiful national holiday like Thanksgiving is in the U.S. There is a tinge, and that ever since I've moved there 30 years ago, I've noticed how in pop culture there is a tendency to make light or make fun of, not in a happy, positive way, but it's sort of in a little toxic, destructive way. And
Yeah.
so I'm just reflecting that in the last hour, I've been able to realize how powerful family connections are in Maori culture, and how important it is to honor them in your heart, regardless if you have a relationship with them or not. But to honor, acknowledge that you come from them, I think would help lessen a lot of suffering, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely, I would. I absolutely would, and I think learning to honor those that are older than us, that are connected to us in whatever way, whether it's through a blood connection, a familial connection, a spiritual connection, whatever that may be, is we can learn something from everybody. You know, you could be one of the most learned people in the world, but there is still something you can learn from the most humble person in the world. You know, and if the day comes when you think you can't learn from somebody, that's the time to hang up your apron, right?
Yeah. Love it. Beautiful. Well, I think this brings us to a close, unless there's anything else you'd like to share in
That's it from me. Thank you. Oh, well, yeah. I mean, apart from ending with, we started with karakia, ending with karakia, that would really be it, if I may.
Please.
Thank you. All right. So, me karakia tātou. Kia tau te manaakitanga, kia runga, ki tēnā, ki tēnā, ki tēnā tātou. Kia piki te ora, kia piki te māramatanga, kia hoki pai atu, kia hoki pai atu. Tuturu whakamaua, kia tina, tina. Wai-a-tai kie. And in English, settle care and protection upon each of us. May our health and understanding grow as we return in health to others and to be with ourselves. Hold fast to what you know to be true and right. So be it.
Wow. So be it. It's in, guys, everybody, if you'd like, it's in the description of this video, the full text in both languages. So it may serve for inspiration as you go out on your journeys. Christine, big hug from the bottom of my heart. Thank you so much for
back to you.
Here around the fire on Spirit Reflections, 14 hours into the future.
And it's still looking good. It's been my absolute privilege to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me to share this. I hope that people have learned a little bit. I've certainly learned a lot just from being on here. So thank you. It's been a real treasure for me.
Thank you. Say hi to Yaponi. Here's hoping in person soon. And guys, if you have any questions, comments, please type below, like and subscribe to Spirit Reflections, and give us suggestions of what type of content you'd like to see us talking around the fire here. Until next time, see you around the fire. Don't go anywhere, Christine. I'm just going to end here, and then we'll stop recording. Take care.